Hey, what's up, Legion? My name is Sal, and this is another expedition log. First off, I'd like to thank all of you for your patience. My life has been nuts for the last few months between day job overload, multiple solo violin concerts, COVID killing me for like 2 weeks, and then having to pack up my entire house and studio in Baltimore City to move to my new house down here in the Old Dominion during the worst time of year to do this, between Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. I'm happy to report that my studio is back up and fully operational down here in my new home in Northern Virginia, and I'm finally ready to start producing ExLogs at a more regular pace. As always, I'd like to thank my patrons and elite explorers who have continued to stick by my side. Your support goes right back into the series, and my various lines of merch will actually be shipping in the first couple of quarters in 2024. My 3D printer now has a home in my spacious garage, and the Dead Mall dioramas will begin production soon, along with the Dead Mall courtyard tree bookmarks and signed notated photos. I'll be getting my Virginia P.O. box in the coming weeks, and I'll make an announcement on my website and social media once that's ready. Links are all down below. But today, we're going to explore the history of Richard Jacobs' 3 regional campus malls in Columbus, Ohio. For your consideration, I'd like you to come take a walk with me through the Eastland, Northland, and Westland Malls, featuring footage from my collaborators DMod VP and fellow SEAL member Kristen from Unicom Productions, and the legendary YouTube channel Dark Exploration Films. But first, a word from our sponsors. Video Game Exchange, and a hotline with a questionable spokesman superhero who you could call in 1990 to pay nerds to teach you how to play video games. Enjoy.
Video Game Mania is happening only at Video Game Exchange. Come in and trade those games you don't play for something exciting and different. At Video Game Exchange, you can try any of our used games before you buy. And if you have any questions, our sales staff can give you knowledgeable answers on any game in the store. Where else can you get selection, great prices, service, and trade-in value for your old video games? Only at Video Game Exchange.
Call Hot Hints for the best Nintendo strategies.
Or give up.
Don't give up. Call 1-900-HOT-HINTS and supercharge your game.
Cool. I can select all my favorite games.
There's hundreds of action-packed hints full of secret passwords on all the latest Nintendo games.
Hot Hints is fast, fun, and it's $1.65 a minute. Now I have the power.
Ask your parents before calling.
Planning for the first of Richard Jacobs' 3 Columbus shopping malls began on June 23, 1961, when a site was chosen and made pad-ready for a brand new Lazarus department store. The Northland Shopping Center had its grand opening and ribbon-cutting ceremony on Thursday, August 13, 1964, as an open-air mall with senior anchors Sears Roebuck & Company and a beautiful lapis lazuli stone-clad Lazarus with a single open courtyard connecting the two. They installed a $15,000 clock in the center court and had ample parking for thousands of shoppers. Guests included Cleveland Browns offensive tackle Lou Groza, nicknamed The Toe, who kicked off Northland's Living with Wood Week, whatever that was. And then Richard Simmons came through to teach shoppers how to do sassy fitness kicks with fabulous flair and tangy zip. By 1975, Jacobs enclosed the concourse to compete with the incredible supernova of new regional enclosed malls that were to eventually overwhelm the United States. By this time, Columbus shoppers now had 2 enclosed Jacobs malls within 20 miles of each other. Northland Mall and Eastland Mall were the first 2 to enter the 1980s with their enclosures, and shoppers loved these malls and malls in general. The 80s were when enclosed malls began to see their peak. Pop culture was saturated with the idea of crazy scientists time-traveling in mall parking lots, teens in goblin mode running from mall cops, the metamorphosis of precocious losers to high school heroes after a trip to the mall, murderous cybernetic beings hunting youth around mall arcades, and boys becoming men after a few arguments about what actually qualifies for an eatery in the food court while yelling at children riding escalators. Richard Jacobs Northland stood for all of these things, and local Columbus shoppers adored his mall. But into the mid-90s, a massive threat began to surface when Glimcher Realty Trust announced plans to develop the nearly 1.3 million square foot Polaris Fashion Center just over 6 miles to the north. Locals knew Polaris would kill Northland, and a heated battle ensued. Then Polaris opened in 2001 and tucked Northland into its deathbed. Lazarus and Sears both had liquidation sales that year, and despite a super rad free internet hub to write emails in the Northland concourse, the mall would find itself hemorrhaging tenants and eateries with the loss of both original anchors. By 2002, the mall was a ghost town, littered with abandoned cars from a better time, and facing a sell-off for anything and everything inside the mall to help its owners pay off their back taxes. On January 28, 2004, demolition began at Northland to make it pad ready for the new Northland Shopping Center, which would see a shiny new Kroger grocery store, Menards, a Franklin County dog shelter and adoption center, and other outlets which are still in service today. In the mid-1960s, a site was chosen at the corner of Refugee and Hamilton Roads in East Columbus for Jacobs' second Compass Mall. By 1967, the site was pad ready and construction was well underway. The centerpiece for the mall would be the Magic Wonderfall, consisting of 1,800 nylon strands that would gently stream 1 million droplets of water top to bottom, creating an illusion of a perpetual waterfall. Newspapers began circulating ads for stores that were about to open in the new mall's tropical setting. The grand opening and ribbon cutting for the Eastland Mall was celebrated on February 14, 1968, and the concourse was flooded with shoppers. The mall would thrive through the 1990s after renovations in both 89 and 99. After changing hands to Glimcher, who owned Polaris Fashion Place, Eastland would receive a Kaufmann's as the fourth anchor in 2005. However, despite only losing one anchor space into the 2010s, Eastland would ultimately succumb to the pressures of more successful malls in the area, such as Tuttle Crossing, Polaris, and Easton Town Center. On February 8, 1961, the Nationwide Development Company announced plans to build the open-air Lincoln Center Shopping Center. However, plans stalled, and Lazarus opened as a standalone store on the site in 1962. The Jacobs Development Company picked up the project and began construction in 1967 on their third Compass Mall to accompany the already built Lazarus department store. Jacobs Westland Mall opened on February 12, 1969, featuring a beautiful garden-themed outdoor concourse, a Lazarus, Sears, JCPenney, and Woolworth. The mall was accentuated by globe-shaped street lamps, trees planted in round dark brick seating areas, and massive fountains that would illuminate the concourse at night with dramatic lighting and water shooting 20 feet into the air. Westland was enclosed in 1982 to resemble what most rural malls looked like back then. Dark brick, muted tones, wooden seating areas around planters with mall fauna, and trees scattered around to breathe some life into an otherwise dark environment, and the complete absence or drastic lack of neon, despite what pop culture has told us. Westland would be the last of Jacobs' 3 Compass Malls, and never really found its footing. With Tuttle Crossing opening in 1997, Westland would spend its golden years collecting mold and decay, with the mall proper closing in 2012. We'll be getting a look inside the mall as it looked during abandonment a bit later in this episode, so please stay tuned. But first, let's head over to the Eastland Mall to take a walk around and to dive even deeper into its history. Welcome to the Eastland Mall in Columbus, Ohio. The footage you're about to see was shot on a shake weight camera in 2018 during my first trip out to Cincinnati, when I was just a sophomore in my tenure of creating and producing the Expedition Log series. I found this footage which I thought was lost after I moved from Baltimore here to Virginia, and originally the plan was to do the abandoned Upper Valley Mall in this episode, but I really wanted to get through the last of my 2018 footage so we can have a completely clear slate of nothing but beautiful stabilized 4K footage and fully produced drone shots. So this is the third to last episode, which will feature 2018 footage, and my full Cincinnati tour in Phase 7 will end with ExLogs showcasing the Town Mall Galleria and Upper Valley Mall. Both of these episodes will begin with 2018 footage, but I revisited both in later years to fly my drone around and do a full 4K shoot. Stick around for those, you don't want to miss them, I promise. By the end of this episode, if you enjoy what you saw and like to see something like this in better resolution, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Today we're focusing on the triumvirate of Jacobs Compass Malls in the Columbus area. We already discussed his first, which was Northland. Northland has been demolished for quite some time, and I tried to show you everything I could for this mall, but it's been abandoned forever and there's really nothing out there except for the pictures that I showed you. However, now that we're walking around inside the Eastland Mall, let's dive deeper into its historical narrative. The Jacobs Development Company announced their second Compass Mall for the Columbus area in the mid-1960s, which would be built on a tract of land in East Columbus about 20 miles south of their already established Northland Mall. Work on the mall would begin on July 12, 1966, but a Lazarus department store would open ahead of the mall later that year. Jacobs wanted to capture every step of traffic they could in Columbus, and they planned to build 4 total centers at each compass point: north, west, east, and south. After about a year and a half of work, construction was finally completed, and the Eastland Mall celebrated its grand opening and ribbon-cutting ceremony on Saturday, February 14, 1968. Eastland served as Central Ohio's only enclosed shopping mall at the time, where the temperature was always a pleasant 72 degrees. Serving as senior anchors were Sears Roebuck & Company, JCPenney, Lazarus, and the Eastland Cinema. I couldn't find any more information on the cinema or any listings for movies that were premiering during this mall's grand opening, but for reference, in 1968, Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey was released in cinemas. It might have been expensive for the Eastland Cinema to run this film, but with a grand opening, hopefully they pulled out all the stops and they brought this legendary film to the locals around this area. If you or any of your loved ones or friends were at this mall during that time, let me know if they remember what movie was playing during the grand opening. Through the 1970s and 80s, Eastland coasted in its eastern Columbus hamlet, serving its locals for years with no other offerings within a short driving distance. This was the norm back then before massive infrastructure overhauls hit the United States. Local roads were how people got places around town, and malls were built to service them, and the local rural malls were built to service those roads. Even though a massive highway like I-95 was commissioned in 1956, it still wasn't fully completed until 2018, which goes to show just how underdeveloped the transit infrastructure was back in the mid to late 1900s. But new super-regional malls would begin to take shape, and the developers would cut deals with city and state government to help subsidize the construction of new highways and utilities to help cities with better and easier to reach roads. These massive new malls would begin to siphon traffic from the older gray ghosts in rural areas where new highways still couldn't support more robust traffic. Notably, around the greater Cincinnati area, there was the I-270 Beltway around Columbus, which work started on in 1962 and finished in 1975. While the Jacobs Compass malls could benefit indirectly from the new Beltway at the time, other malls would choose locations to build in much closer proximity to the Beltway exits to make it easier for shoppers to find and take advantage of less one-lane rural traffic. Through the 1990s, we would see 3 malls begin to take shape that would pose a harsh competitive edge to the Jacobs Compass malls. Jacobs' first bit of competition to open was the mall at Tuttle Crossing. This Taubman gem spans 1.1 million square feet and had its grand opening on July 11, 1997, with senior anchors Lazarus, Sears, JCPenney, and Marshall Fields. Around this time, the real estate industry was in a torrent of mergers and consolidations. Properties just weren't appreciating their value nearly as much as developers thought they would, and larger REITs were eating up smaller ones, while even bigger retail magnates were entering agreements to combine their power rings in an effort to engorge their purses even more. Most notably, we had the merger of DeBartolo and Simon in 1996. However, rumors began circulating that Jacobs, who was definitely not the same size as DeBartolo or Simon, but the rumors were that Jacobs was about to merge with the Boston-based Wells Park Group, who was operating 40 malls at the time. With Eastland at about only 2% vacancy, a renovation was finished in 1998 that saw new mall entrances, over a dozen new stores, and the addition of a food court, complete with several eateries and a center vaulted skylight. However, the next competition to enter the market was the Easton Town Center, which was a mixed indoor-outdoor mall anchored by Lazarus and Nordstrom. Easton opened in 1999, and the area, meant to look like a small city, spanned an impressive 1.6 million square feet. With two powerhouse shopping centers in fairly close proximity to Jacobs' stronghold of campus malls, the balance of retail power would begin to shift when it was announced that in the mid-1990s, Glimcher Realty Trust would be developing an upscale, super-regional mall called Polaris Fashion Place as the cornerstone for their new 1,200-acre development in northern Columbus. Jacobs immediately knew that this mall would be the demise of Northland and would take a considerable amount of traffic away from his other malls. There was even a petition started at Northland to boycott the mall, but locals in closer proximity to the proposed site for Polaris met at city council meetings to argue that both malls could exist in the same market. Ultimately, the project was approved, and construction started in the summer of 2000. By November of 2001, the 1.3 million square foot Polaris Fashion Place opened with a total of 7 senior anchors, 4 of which were new additions to the market: Kaufmann's, The Great Indoors, Lord & Taylor, and Saks Fifth Avenue. At this point, Northland Mall was well underway for their closing liquidation, and 3 of its anchors were moved to Polaris: Lazarus, Sears, and JCPenney. By 2001, Jacobs was in serious financial trouble with Northland on the brink of complete failure, and Westland losing nearly all higher-end tenants. By the end of the year, Jacobs had defaulted on the loans for all 3 of their malls, and the mortgages for Eastland and Westland were turned over to the bank, while Northland went through a liquidation and ultimately shuttered. Then, on December 25, 2003, Glimcher Realty Trust, owners of Polaris Fashion Place, decided to invest further in the area and purchased the Eastland Mall from the bank for $29.7 million. They immediately dedicated $12 million of that to fund the addition of a new Kaufmann's department store here at Eastland. By this time, Northland Mall had finished its liquidation sale, and on January 28, 2004, demolition began to make way for the Northland Shopping Center. However, Eastland was in good hands, now with the developer slinging cash left and right for renovations, new department stores, and redevelopment. A few months after the Kaufmann's was opened, Federated Department Stores, parent company of Lazarus and Macy's, announced a series of strategic moves to better position their offerings in several markets across the US. Part of this plan was to shift the Lazarus name into a dual masthead, and by the end of 2003, the Lazarus at Eastland was rebranded to a Lazarus Macy's. Just 3 years later, in 2006, Federated had purchased the Kaufmann's chain, and the Lazarus Macy's was moved into the former Kaufmann's space at Eastland after it closed, now leaving the former Lazarus space vacant. 1 year later, on July 27, 2007, the Columbus Dispatch published an announcement that Glimcher would spend $10 million to demolish this building, the former Lazarus anchor, to build a single-story 100,000 square foot JCPenney, while the existing JCPenney would be split into several stores with access to Eastland's center court. But these plans never surfaced, and the demolition was scrapped. The former Lazarus, right here, is still there even to this day in January of 2024 in all of its luxurious lapis lazuli glory. Into the 2010s, Eastland Mall was performing adequately as a Class B mall, while the Class A malls such as Polaris and Tuttle were still siphoning traffic away. Glimcher decided to put the mall up for sale in June of 2014 with a minimum bid of $9 million. While they purchased the mall for about $30 million, they baked another $10 million into their loan with the promise of the Lazarus demolition project. But I don't think that money was ever intended to be put back into Eastland, and I think they just spent it somewhere else to keep the banks away from. Glimcher stated that their reason for sale wasn't based on productivity, because they thought the mall was performing pretty well according to their standards. The fact was, they had a $40 million mortgage, and the mall was only valued at about $21.5 million after they took an $18.5 million impairment loss for the Eastland Mall in 2012. But Glimcher struck a greasy agreement with the bank. If someone purchased the mall for less than the mortgage value, the bank agreed that Glimcher wouldn't have to pay the difference, and they'd be released from the mortgage. They published no further details of this agreement, but I'm assuming there was some sort of liquidity exchange somewhere, and that was a good deal for Glimcher, and if I were them, I'd probably take it too, if I was in their position. Nobody put a bid in for this mall, and it sat on the market for a while until the mortgage went into default, falling into the hands of Florida-based special servicing account LNR Property by August 6, 2014. LNR hired Texas-based Woodmont to manage the mall. By February of 2015, an $18 million bid was placed for the Eastland Mall, but LNR rejected it for unknown reasons. But the following month, LNR placed Eastland up for sale on auction.com with a minimum asking price of $5 million. The auction saw very little action, and was concluded by March when an unnamed buyer based in the Middle East purchased the mall for just $9.7 million under the shell company name of Eastland Mall Holdings. Just a couple months later, JCPenney would shutter their Eastland location in May of 2015. But now we're going to shift to footage shot in 2022 by Kristen of Unicom Productions to give you an update on what the mall looks like just a few months before its closure, where we'll finish up the mall's historical narrative.
This janky looking wall. Oh, that looks rough.
The mall continued to decline through the late 2010s, and the Macy's announced the closure of their Eastland Mall store on January 4, 2017, which closed 3 months later in March after a liquidation sale. While Sears was left as the only remaining anchor, they also announced closure on June 6 of the same year, and after their liquidation, the Sears closed in September. 1 year later in 2018, I showed up in my sophomore year of filming and producing the ExLog series. The mall seemed to be somewhat busy, but the first thing I noticed was how most of the stores were subpar local outlets, and wondered why anyone would come here rather than traveling a few minutes up 270 to Tuttle or Blaris. Maybe bigger bougie malls are more intimidating and locals just hope to find that thing they're looking for at a mom and pop shop. I don't know. Just 1 year after my visit, Columbus City Code Enforcement were tipped off that conditions were rapidly deteriorating, and they began issuing citations to the owners, Eastland Mall Holdings, who at the time of their purchase were based out of the Middle East but now had a Louisiana mailing address. Violations included disgusting mattresses and furniture littered along the side of the road at the mall with old and soiled clothing hanging out of trash bags. But one of the more egregious violations was the mall fire sprinkler system, which apparently didn't have any power running to it. It was also found that mall tenants weren't paying rent, nor have the owners been chasing them for it, which caused a massive delinquency in utility and tax payments for the mall. Then 2020 hit and COVID closed malls. When Eastland reopened, they were slapped with litigation in April 2021 as the conditions continued to decline. Kristen showed up the following year in May of 2022 to get the footage you're currently looking at. 1 month after Kristen's visit, the Eastland Mall case went to court, and in June of 2022, Eastland's manager admitted to the property neglect, and Judge Stephanie Mingo formally declared the Eastland Mall a public nuisance. If the mall owners didn't clean this place up and get it up to code within 60 days, the property would face abatement and possible demolition by the city. Despite a flaccid attempt to fix this place up, the mall suffered a water main break on Monday, December 26, 2022, as many other ailing malls with shady owners have seen in the winter months just before potential closure. But because of the waterline catastrophe, Eastland Mall officially closed its doors early on Tuesday, December 27, and it has remained closed since.
They say the more the merrier, and you will be saving on 2s, 3s, and more this week at Lazarus stock-up sale. Check out the savings on young men's Levi's denim jeans, knit tees, and shorts. Save 20% on one, save 30% on 2 or more. Buy one new look at regular price in juniors or Mrs. Casual and get the second at half off. Plus t-shirts for misses and little boys are just 2 for $18. Save more when you stack up, fill up, and stock up for the whole family. Only at Lazarus stock-up sale, and only through Saturday.
Multiple plans have been announced to redevelop the area dating back even to 2007, but right now the City of Columbus Department of Neighborhoods announced that the Columbus-based MKSK architectural firm was selected to lead the development of the community plan for the area in and surrounding the Eastland Mall site. The current plans call for a redevelopment project scheduled to cost only about $850,000, but of course that number is probably going to change as the project actually takes shape. At this time, no work is planned to commence, but because the owners out in the Middle East are still facing fines and lawsuits over their handling of this property, and until that litigation is settled, nothing's going to happen here. If you're local and you hear something different or something new, please let me know on my social media, down in my comment section, or on my Discord server. Let me know, because I'd love to hear from you. But for now, Eastland's going to sit abandoned, awaiting development. And in a moment, I'd like to take you all for a walk over at the Westland Mall to take a look at what it looks like inside during abandonment after these messages.
It is now the end of an era. One of the last original malls in Columbus is closing. After more than 50 years, Eastland Mall will shut its doors for good Saturday. Since 1968, it was a place where many of you remember going, whether for the movies, out to eat, or shopping. Eastland's closure follows the Northland and Westland Malls. The shopping areas that remain include Easton, Tuttle Crossing, and Polaris.
As we got older, my brother worked at the movie theater there, and so he would sneak us in to see movies.
Helen Jones grew up going to the Eastland Mall.
And then in college, I worked at the Baker's Shoe Store there.
For decades, it was the place to meet Santa and get your Christmas shopping done.
Now we're here, and you can see Santa Claus is up there, and there are lots of kids coming and going.
Not long after the mall was built, there was even a housing boom in the area. But since then, a lot has changed. The Eastland Mall now closed, following the same fate at the Northland and Westland Malls. Shopping areas like Easton, Tuttle Crossing, and Polaris remain. Eastland Mall will permanently close on Saturday, but the doors have been closed to customers since Monday due to a broken water line. As for the future of the site, there is no plan right now. For now, the building will remain standing, a reminder of the memories many share.
To see the demise of the mall and that part of what it meant to me as a teen and as a young mom, it's sad. It's watching that your childhood disappear before your eyes.
It's a very easy situation to operate. You just push the buttons in right here on the two sides, and right here, push the button in, that releases it, and then after you let go, it locks firmly in place. So really, you're all set. And this is tough.
It is?
Listen, give you an example. Say you have you have to get up on the wall, high ceiling, vault the ceiling. Hey, listen, just walk right up. And I tell you, it's very safe, it's durable, and it's lightweight.
Scaring me.
So really, see,
wow.
Now it's locked in place, okay? So really, you think,
Oh, God, Harold, are you okay?
actually, I didn't have it locked. It is very safe to operate.
You're special at King Quick. We are special at King Quick. Here's our special today.
This week's special, 3.25% fresh milk, $1.89 a gallon. Hot coffee, just 10 cents a cup. A dime good cup of coffee.
We're open night and day. We're there when you need us. Remember, you're special at King Quick. King Quick.
Welcome to the Westland Mall. When I visited this mall, it was already abandoned for about 10 years, and I had every intention on finding a way inside without breaking anything. But the place was sealed up tight, and armed security was patrolling the area. I remember talking with Ace around this time about Westland and how it had thwarted both of our ingress attempts multiple times. This was the one that got away, according to Ace. But neither of us were about to defy orders from a bored pudgy dude with a loaded weapon. There was also this weird-looking black trailer parked in the lot that looked like some sort of law enforcement or military presence. And even though the nice security guard in the pickup truck said he would gladly let me in for a few bucks if they weren't watching from the trailer, I didn't want to chance it. So I just shelved these clips in the archives, never expecting to use them in any episode ever. But when I decided to dig into the Jacobs Compass Mall story, I reached out to Dark Exploration Films to ask if I could use their footage to complete this story. Dark Exploration Films enthusiastically gave me permission. So thanks to them, I'd like to take you on a walk around the inside of the abandoned Westland Mall, a place I never thought that I would get to tell the story of. So let's jump inside and have a brief chat about the history of this mall to bring the Jacobs Compass Mall saga to a close. By February 8, 1961, the Nationwide Development Company released plans for their Lincoln Center, which was to be an open-air concept shopping center anchored by a Lazarus department store. These plans never gained any traction, and they fizzled out after about a year. However, the Lazarus was still going ahead with their store, which opened by itself on this site in 1962. A few years went by, and Richard E. Jacobs Development Company had already penetrated the Columbus market with their Northland Mall, which opened on August 13, 1964. They announced plans to take over the project for the mall which would accompany the Lazarus, and began construction in 1967, which would be their third Compass Mall, with Eastland Mall's construction already underway. The Westland Mall held its grand opening and ribbon-cutting ceremony on Wednesday, February 12, 1969. As part of the mall construction, Lazarus doubled its footprint to 171,000 square feet, introducing a pillared portico entrance. Westland also saw the addition of its second and third senior anchors, Sears and JCPenney. These days, when you think of an outdoor mall, there's typically sidewalks and roads for cars with stores lining two sides and maybe some plants, some weird-looking local sculptures, and a bunch of garbage cans. But back in the 60s, in the golden days of open-air malls, even they were beautiful. Westland had gorgeous, massive fountains shooting water into the air that would actively react to the outside weather. The mall featured several pieces of artwork by Cleveland-based artist Clarence E. Van Duzer, including a gigantic rotating free-form work and Art Deco-styled street lamps lining the dark brick pedestrian concourse. Planters accentuated the design, and storefronts had a perpetual canopy to keep the shoppers out of possible inclement weather, and there wasn't a car in sight outside of the parking lot. When the 1970s hit, the United States was thrust into the biggest enclosed shopping mall expansion we'd probably ever see. So developers that held property with open-air malls were quick to take advantage of federal programs to give tax leniency on redevelopment projects that prioritized renovating existing space rather than building on brand new property. So Jacobs went ahead and began to work to enclose the concourse at Westland Mall, just like many other developers would at the time. And construction was completed in 1982, which is the aesthetic language this mall retained up until its abandonment. And minus the decay you're seeing right now in this footage, this is what the Westland Mall looked like for all of its enclosed life. If you can look past the decay, vandalism, and mold, right now you're seeing what Westland looked like in 1982. This mall is a time capsule, and I'm so glad that I get to tell the story of this place. Thanks, Dark Exploration Films. I really appreciate it. In the late 1980s, Westland saw its first few changes. The second floor to Sears was closed off due to dwindling sales and was converted to an office space for employees servicing the Discover Card-backed Sears credit card. Then a Chi-Chi's restaurant opened a few months later in the fall of 1987. However, moving into the 1990s, Westland would begin to see a sharp decline in their traffic as new super-regional malls were releasing announcements for grand openings in the Columbus area. We talked about the three big malls that entered the I-270 Beltway corridor, which were Tuttle Crossing, Polaris Fashion Place, and Easton Town Center. But Tuttle posed the greatest threat to Westland when it poached JCPenney, leaving this mall with only Sears as their senior anchor way back in 1997. As Jacobs crossed the Y2K line into the new millennium, it was when his company was facing default for both Eastland and Westland malls. By 2001, the bank foreclosed both malls, and Westland was now in the hands of a special servicer, Cigna Investments. 1 year later, Beverly Hills, California-based real estate investor Jack Kashani purchased the mall in 2002 for $5.5 million against the mall's assessed value of $20 million. Kashani immediately announced a shift for Westland Mall's direction, which he would now focus on a budget-oriented offering in a bazaar type setting like a flea market kind of vibe. So he hired real estate brokerage CB Richard Ellis to manage and lease the property. There were only about 30 stores inside the mall by 2003, 13 of which were facing expiring leases. Out of those 13, 5 opted to leave: Skyline Chili, Sam Goody, Payless Shoes, Things Remembered, and KB Toys. CB Ellis recommended to Kashani that he not pour any more money into any renovations so that he could provide favorable lease rates to lure any new tenant they could find to occupy this mall. Later in 2003, following Federated Department Store's consolidation efforts, the Westland Mall Lazarus was converted to a Lazarus Macy's. By 2005, it was again renovated to a singular Macy's masthead, but 2 years later the Macy's would shutter, leaving the Westland Mall with a terminally low occupancy, along with Sears as its only anchor. By 2010, there were only about a dozen stores still remaining in the mall, with the only nationally known retailers being Sears, Finish Line, Champ Sports, a GNC, and Staples. The rest were brought in by Kashani and offered local trinkets, thrifting options, really questionable eateries with probably zero regard for the FDA, and a Franklin County Sheriff Station. A Hollywood casino was opened near the mall in 2012, which brought locals a sense of optimism that a revitalization effort was coming to the area. But the interior for Westland Mall closed in November of 2012, just after the casino opened. While Sears had already closed off their mall entrance, they remained open for a few years following the mall closure. But in 2017, Sears closed their Westland Mall location, leaving the property 100% vacant. The mall itself sat abandoned for over a decade, collecting the mold and decay you've seen in this footage. But in 2023, the state of Ohio approved $13 million in funding to demolish the site and get it ready for redevelopment efforts. By this time, in January 2024, the mall has been demolished, and at this time, there's no new plans for the former mall. They just wanted to make it a clean slate and ready for redevelopment. Once again, if any of you locals hear news for the area around this mall, please let me know in the comments or my social media.
Walking around with me and Sal and Kristen and Jacob and the dead explorer, and I hope you beautiful people were pleasured on this trip, and I can't wait to get this shit out of here. I'm gonna go call Barry Glazer and file a wrongful death lawsuit when I'm dead from the black lung and take Sal's new house. But right now, I gotta go find a bathroom in this joint. I'm gonna go throw up all over myself. I'll see you soon, everybody. Bye!
I'd like to thank all of you again for your patience between the last few episodes and for sticking with me through our Jacob's Compass Mall story. Thanks especially to my patrons and elite explorers who have continued to support me through the years, and to all of you out there in the Quite Studios Legion of Explorers for keeping the spirit of the ExLog alive and well. I have so much more stuff that I want to show you guys, and I can't wait for all of the stuff that I've got coming up, so please stay tuned. If you dug what you just saw, and if you'd like to see more stuff like it, please hit that subscribe button. I'm finally settled into my new house here in Northern Virginia, and my studio is back up at 100% capacity, and I've even got a new workshop where I'm going to be working on some super cool projects to release as merch. It's all up from here, Legion. I have massive things planned for my channel, and I don't want any of you to miss a thing. So please follow me across my social media to hear what I'm up to, and to get news on future releases. I'm on X, Instagram, Facebook, and Threads, but the quickest way to get my ear is through my Discord server, home of DMod. Just head over to discord.gg on your phone, tablet, computer, whatever, and answer a couple of questions from a moderator. You'll get your role after answering, and that's it. Links for all of my other stuff are down below, but generally you can find me with my handle @SalvatoreAmadeo. I'll be back soon with ExLog 121 and the Carew Tower with its insanely beautiful Art Deco design and multiple subterranean levels of completely dead mall. I can't wait to produce that one and show you how awesome that place is. I've been waiting years for this. But in the meantime, please take care of yourselves out there, Legion. Be safe, happy 2024, and have a fantastic day.
Video Game Mania is happening only at Video Game Exchange. Come in and trade those games you don't play for something exciting and different. At Video Game Exchange, you can try any of our used games before you buy. And if you have any questions, our sales staff can give you knowledgeable answers on any game in the store. Where else can you get selection, great prices, service, and trade-in value for your old video games? Only at Video Game Exchange.
Call Hot Hints for the best Nintendo strategies.
Or give up. Don't give up. Call 1-900-HOT-HINTS and supercharge your game.
Cool. I can select all my favorite games.
There's hundreds of action-packed hints full of secret passwords on all the latest Nintendo games.
Hot Hints is fast, fun, and it's $1.65 a minute. Now I have the power.
Ask your parents before calling.
It's a very easy situation to operate. You just push the buttons in right here on the two sides. There are two little buttons. And all you do is push them in, and that will release it. And right here, push the button in, that releases it. And then after you let go, it locks. Firmly in place, so really, you're all set. And this is tough.
It is?
Listen, give you an example. Say you have you have to get up on the wall, high ceiling, ball ceiling. Hey, listen, just walk right up. And I tell you, it's very safe, it's durable, and it's lightweight.
Carrying me.
Oh, really? See,
wow.
Now it's locked in place, okay? So really, you think...
Oh, God, Harold, are you okay?
Actually, I didn't have it locked. It is very safe to operate.
It's open when they're not. King Quick. It offers you a lot. King Quick. King Quick. We're your neighborhood store. When you need a magazine or good book, our selection is just right. We have magazines and good books. Take a book to bed tonight. Who's open night or day? King Quick. We're there when you're special at King Quick. We have specials at King Quick. Here's our special today.
This week's special, 3.25% fresh milk, $1.89 a gallon. Hot coffee, just 10 cents a cup. A dime good cup of coffee.
We're open night and day. We're there when you need us.
Remember, you're special at King Quick.